All right, today we're going to start a brand new series titled Executive Orders. What do you think of that for a title? Actually, Taylor's the one that kind of prompted me on this. I've got a tickle list in my office of topics that I want to cover. Some of them are topics that I think every church should cover every so many years. There are certain things in there that I think we need to do periodically. One of those things would be, the fundamentals of faith, which we've done in the last 3 years since I've been here. The Beatitudes is one that I think should be done every few years. And there's just certain passages. And I've got this tickle list of things that I wanted to back. And then I also pray and say, okay, God, what do we need to have right now? And sometimes I take something off my tickle list. Sometimes God will just lay something else on my heart. And I had a couple of different topics that I had narrowed it down to that I thought, okay, it's going to be one of these. And I was leaning really towards one. And Taylor texted me Sunday night. And he said, Dad, do you know what your next series is yet? Because if not, I got a great suggestion for you. And so I said, I kind of got it narrowed down to two, leaning towards one. I said, what's your idea? He said, I think you should have a series titled Repeal and Replace. He says, it's really hot right now. Everybody's talking about that repeal and replace of the Obamacare. He said, it'd be a catchy title. He says, you could talk about all the things in our life that we need to get rid of. There are things like fear and doubt and worry, and there's all these things that we have in our lives that we need to repeal and allow God to replace them with something else. He said, it could be a really, really catchy title. And that got me thinking, hey, that's kind of cool. I'm going along with something that's out there right now, and I got thinking about that. And then my mind went to, there's one thing on my tickle list that I've been wanting to do, just waiting for the right time to pull it out. I've been wanting to go through a series on the 10 Commandments. And I thought, we could do the 10 Commandments and call it the Executive Orders. 6 years from now, it won't work to call it the Executive Orders probably. But right now, calling the Executive Orders, it just fits. So we're going to do a series on the 10 Commandments, and we're going to call them the 10 Executive Orders. Are you with me? So that's our new series. In the United States, an executive order is an official statement from the president about how the federal agencies he oversees are to use their resources. An executive order in and of itself is not a law. The president does not have the power to make a law. An executive order, in its truest sense, is simply instructions on how an existing law is to be carried out or to be enforced. Let me give you a very simple, because a lot of you might be wondering, what is an executive order? What's the difference between an executive order and a law? And believe me, this is not going to be a political message, okay? But we need to get a little background to what a real executive order is to see how it ties in. A real simplistic example that might help you understand what an executive order is, okay? Now, they wouldn't issue an executive order on this. This would not be benefiting of an executive order, but this is how it would work. There is an existing law that says people must stop for a red light. An executive order which stated that people no longer need to stop for red lights would be an illegal order because it's changing a law that is already on the books, okay? It can't change a law that's there. However, the president could issue an order saying that all intersections must be equipped with traffic lights to help reduce the number of people that ignore that law. Okay, so an executive order has to do with a law that is on the books, and this is how we are going to help enforce it. This is where we want to direct the resources to make that happen. During his first 12 days in office, President Trump has issued 18 executive orders. It might be more than that now, but in the first 12 days, 18. Some people are happy with the orders that he's given. Others feel he's overstepped his authority. Many are outraged that a president would issue that many orders so soon. But what President Trump has done is not unusual. Barack Obama issued 19 executive orders in his first 12 days of office. So he had one more than Trump. So Trump is not doing anything out of the ordinary. Presidents always issue executive orders, and for most of them, a lot of those are right in their first day. Anytime you change parties, a Republican president is going to throw out a lot of the executive orders that the Democratic president put in. And how does he do that? He issues a new executive order, overruling the first executive order. Anytime a Democratic president takes over from a Republican, they do the same thing. It's just happened if you check history. The question really isn't whether or not a U.S. president has the right to issue the orders. Executive orders are as old as the U.S. Constitution. They've been used for over 200 years. So the question isn't whether or not they have the authority to issue an order. The question is the executive order clarifying or giving direction to a law that is already there, or is it trying to write a new law? Because the president cannot write a law. We have a legislative branch that writes the laws. Right now, there's disagreement, as you all know, as to whether or not some of the executive orders are legal or not. Is he overstepping his bounds? But even in those issues, we have people on both sides. There are some that they are trying to overturn, saying they're illegal. You got some people in the judicial system saying he's overstepped his bounds, he can't do that. And other people involved in the same judicial system are saying he was perfectly okay to do that. So there's disagreement even between the branch of office that is supposed to oversee those things as to whether or not it's right or wrong. So the question that's coming up is the president authorized? Is he authorized to make that ruling? The problem with our society today is most people are self-centered. We think the world revolves around us. We want laws that allow us to do whatever we choose, but will restrict others from doing what we don't think they should do. We don't really care whether something is right or wrong, smart or careless, fair or unfair. What matters to us is how does it affect me, and do I like it? So for the past couple of weeks, we've been watching protests, riots, and debates on every executive order that has been issued. At least one of those orders has been temporarily blocked by a federal judge that believes the president has overstepped his authority. It will be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court for a final ruling. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that order, because there doesn't seem to be agreement within the Justice Department right now. That's another problem with laws. Laws are always subjective. No matter how well a law is written, different people will interpret the law different ways. Our human nature is to be our own ruler. We don't like being told what to do. And if any person or any law prohibits us from doing what we want, we either ignore the law altogether or we try to make it say something different so we can have things our way. Guess what? This isn't Burger King. You don't get it your way. Some of the older people got that. So I guess the real question is, who's really in charge? Who does have the right to make the rules, interpret the rules, and enforce the rules? Who is the final authority? I don't have to like a law, but I'm smart enough to know that my opinion really doesn't matter that much. If I break a law, the judge isn't going to care what I thought about the law or what my interpretation of the law was. The judge's interpretation of the law is what matters. I can appeal the case to a higher court if I want to, but eventually my appeals will run out and a final determination will be made by the highest court in the land. Once again, it won't matter what I think. The final determination will be based on what the law says and how that law is interpreted by the judge. In our political system, we have a legislative branch and a judicial branch. The legislative branch's job is to make laws, and the judicial branch's job is to interpret the law. But is the law always interpreted correctly? Is the way we interpret the law today really the intent of the law when it was made? When we look at any law, there are several questions that we need to ask. Number one, who made the law, and were they authorized to make the law? Number two, why was the law made? Number three, who does the law apply to? Number four, what is the correct interpretation of the law? And number five, does the law still apply today? Did you know that there are currently over 2 million laws in existence in the U.S.? Some of those laws are federal, some are state, some are county, some are city, etc. Some of the laws have been there for so long and they've been forgotten, but technically, if you go back, they're still there. They may not be enforced, but they're still there. For example, in Arizona, it is legal for a man to beat his wife, but no more than once a month. Is that why some of our people go to Arizona for 3 months a year? In Idaho, cannibalism will get you up to 14 years in prison, except in extreme cases where you had to eat your friend to survive. Then you're okay. I guess they figure if you had to eat your friend, you've already been punished enough. In California, it is illegal to ride a bicycle in a swimming pool. Where'd that one come from? In Ohio, it is illegal to give a fish alcohol. I'm glad I don't live in Virginia, because in Virginia, chickens are prohibited from laying eggs before 8 a.m., and they must be done laying eggs before 4 p.m. How do you legislate that one? Sorry, chickens, gotta wait till tomorrow. Here's one some of you guys might like. In South Carolina, every adult male is required to bring a rifle with them to church on Sunday, just in case they're attacked by Indians. Now, here's one I actually like. Maybe we should institute this one here in Yakima. In Clarendon, Texas, it is illegal to stay home from church on Sunday unless you're sick. I actually kind of like that one. I think we should bring that one back. Okay, but there are laws out there that have been made years ago that are still there. They obviously don't apply. Some of these rules, it's like, why did they even come up with that law? I mean, why did they make a law you can't ride a bicycle in a swimming pool? Were too many people doing it? Was it a problem? Or did one person try it and drown, and so they made a law for everybody else because one person was stupid? I don't know. I don't know where these laws come from. But these are actual laws that are on the books. Some of them obviously don't apply anymore. I don't think we have to worry about the Indians coming in on Sunday morning and interrupting our service. There are other people we might have to worry about, but not the Indians. Over the next couple of months, we're going to be looking at the Ten Commandments, or as they will be referred to in this series, the executive orders. Our main text, you can guess, is Exodus chapter 20, because that's where we find these executive orders. Now, in the first two verses of chapter 20, the first two questions that I asked are answered. Exodus 20, verse 1 says, "And God spoke all these words." So who gave these executive orders? God. They were written by Moses, but who gave them? Who did they come from? God. Well, actually it was Jesus, because throughout the Bible, Jesus is the one that actually speaks. Jesus is the Word of God. So anytime you read God spoke, it was Jesus doing the talking. Okay, so it's actually Jesus Christ. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God." And when you see Word there, if you read through John, you find out when it says Word, it's talking about Jesus Christ. So was he, if it was Jesus that gave the orders, was he authorized to give those orders? Well, if we go ahead 2 verses to John 1:3, it says, "Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." And in Colossians chapter 1, verses 16 to 17, it says, "For in him," talking about Jesus, "all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. All things, or he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Colossians chapter 2, the second part of verse 10 says, "He," Jesus, "is the head over every power and authority." He is the head of every authority. Jesus is the top dog. There's no authority on earth that has more power than he does. He is the legislative branch and the judicial branch, all rolled into one. We don't have to like his rules, but there's no higher authority. Jesus gets to make the rules, and he's the one we'll answer to if we break the rules. Rioting and protesting won't change anything. We can either choose to obey the rules, or we can ignore them and suffer the consequences for our choices. But he is authorized to make the rules, not just issue orders on how the rules apply. He is authorized to make the rules from the beginning. So in the second verse of chapter 20, Jesus states why he made the rules. Exodus 22 says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Essentially what he's telling them is, look at everything I've done for you. I care about you and what you're going through. I have great plans for you, but if you don't want to receive the great things I have, but if you want to receive the great things I have for you, there are some rules that you'll need to follow. The executive orders weren't given because God was bored and had nothing else to do. They weren't given because he wanted more perks for himself. He's not doing these things for him. He already has everything. He can't have more than he already has. He cares about us and wants us to inherit all that he has. So he gave us the instructions that need to be carried out so that we can have what he has waiting for us. So now we get to executive order number 1. I alone am God. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3 says, you shall have no other gods before me. This isn't executive order number 1 just because it's the first one given. It's number 1 because it's first priority. If we don't get this one right, none of the others will really matter. If we get this one right, we will automatically follow all the rest of the rules. If we don't get this one right, we will argue with the rest of the rules and try to make excuses why they don't apply. I've always struggled with the last 2 words of this command. Before me. What does that mean when it says before me? You shall have no other gods before me. Does that mean it's okay to have other gods, little g, as long as we have God, big G, as number 1? That's sure what it sounds like, doesn't it? Don't have any other gods before me. I want to be the number 1 God, but you can worship any God you want. Of course, I know that's not what it means, but that's what it sounds like. That's how the command would have been interpreted by all the other nations that were living at the time that this command was given. In fact, some of the Israelites may have even interpreted it when they first heard that. You have no other gods before me. But as we go through the rest of the 10 Commandments, it's going to give us a little bit more clarification. That's not what it means. All of the other nations, including Egypt, where the Israelites had just spent 400 years, worshiped multiple gods. The gods of these nations had different names, but all of them had a primary god that was viewed as the king of the gods, and then there were lesser gods under him. In some of the nations, the king or the emperor was the supreme god. And it was believed that all the other gods reported to the emperor. But most of the nations visited some type of invisible god, and even their head god was an invisible god. And those gods were usually represented by some kind of image or statue. The Philistines, their main god was Dagon. The Moabites had Shamash, and the Ammonites had Molech. Later, the Greeks had Zeus. These gods were the national god. But they also worshiped other gods. They had fertility gods, storm gods, sun gods, sea gods. I mean, they had gods for everything. They believed they needed to keep all the gods happy in order to have a good life. They were always afraid that they might offend one of the gods. And if they offended any of the gods, their life wouldn't be so well. They were so afraid of offending a god that it was common for one nation to adopt gods from another nation and add them to their collection of gods. When you defeat another nation, you see what gods have. Oh, we forgot about that. Okay, let's take that god. Let's add him into what we have. We don't want to offend anybody, so we'll take some of your gods and we'll add them to our list. The Greeks were so concerned that they might offend a lesser god that when the Apostle Paul came to Athens, he found that they had a shrine dedicated to the unknown God. Just in case there's one we forgot, this is your shrine. So when we look at this executive order, it would appear that God is saying he just wants us, he just wants to be the primary God. You can have all the gods you want as long as I'm the most important one. But that's not what he's saying. God doesn't simply want to be our number 1 God. He wants to be our only God. A literal translation of this passage is, you shall have no other gods before my face. The Hebrew word for me, that's interpreted me in this passage, comes from the word for face. So in other words, what he's really saying is, don't come before my face while you are worshiping other gods. That's an insult to him. If you're worshiping any other gods, don't even attempt to come into his presence. God doesn't want to be just one of many. He wants to be the only. Throughout the Bible, our relationship with God is illustrated with the image of a marriage covenant. For those of you that are married, there was a line in your marriage vows. Hopefully you remember this vow. There was a line in there that had the words, forsaking all others. How many remember that? Forsaking all others. What do you think your spouse would have done if it got to that point of the ceremony and the pastor's saying, repeat after me, and it gets to the forsaking all others? You go, wait. I want to change this part. And so you, instead of saying forsaking all others, you say, I promise to make you my favorite spouse. I will love you more than all my other husbands or wives. I will take you as my only spouse, but I still want to date other people. How long do you think that marriage would have lasted? I think it would be over before it even started. You would have been left at the altar. The Israelites tried that during various times of their history. We're talking about some of this on Wednesday nights. We're going through the book of Judges, and we're seeing these times when the Israelites did that. They wanted to worship God. Most of the time, they did not totally reject God. They still worshiped God, but they also worshiped other gods. They brought these other gods in and said, God's going to be our main God, but we want these other gods. God said, No, I'm not going to tolerate that. I am your one and only. They found out when they did that God was not willing to share his affections with anyone. What do you think would happen if a man came home from work one day and said, honey, I want to introduce you to my new girlfriend. Don't worry, you're still my wife, but you just aren't enough for me anymore. I will love you, but I want to love somebody else too. How well do you think that would go? That would not work very well. You guys are all tracking with me here. We can choose to worship anything or anyone we want to, but there is only one God. We can choose to worship something else, but they're not true gods. And God does not want us to worship them. He wants us to worship him only. Joshua, in his farewell address to the Israelites, said in Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 and 15, now fear the Lord and serve him with all, everybody say all, with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshiped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord is undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods of that your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. We can choose. The Israelites did it all the time. We still do today. We can choose who we want to worship. But we can't worship other gods and still worship the true God at the same time. He will not share with somebody else because really there is nobody to share to. And we're going to get into that a little bit next week when we get into the idols. Those other gods are not real gods. There's only one that's the true God. He says, worship me and worship me only. Now Joshua said, serve the Lord with all faithfulness. That word faithful appears in our wedding vows too. You remember that one? I will be faithful only unto you. When we get married, we pledge to be faithful to our spouse and forsake all others. Faithfulness is not a virtue that's common in today's society. Even though many people speak the word, they don't really mean what they say. Most people, even though they say the word faithful with their mouths, in their minds they add the words, until I get bored with you, or until something better comes along. They may not say it out loud. But that's the way we think of faithfulness. I will be faithful for now. We do that with our contracts, not just weddings. We do that with our contracts. We go out and take a loan out for a car, and we sign the line. I will make all the payments on here. But in our minds, we're already thinking about how we can get out of the contract if we decide the car's not working for us. And there are lawyers that make lots of money by helping people get out of the contracts that they've made. That's not faithfulness. Faithfulness is, I will do this. There are no options. There is no plan B. This is the only plan. We want our options only open. We don't want to tie ourselves down to only one. What if somebody else comes along with a better idea? I just didn't know about that option beforehand, so I'm going to, I'll be faithful to you for now, but if something better comes along I didn't know that was there, I want to be free to go and take that better one. The problem with that philosophy in this scenario is there is nothing better than God. The grass always looks greener somewhere else. The devil will make it look attractive. The Bible says sin is fun for a season, but it always leads to destruction. There is nothing better. People do that with their religion. Sarah Michelle Gellar, star of the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, said, I consider myself a spiritual person. I believe in an idea of God, although it's my own personal ideal. I find most religions interesting, and I've been to every kind of denomination, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist. I've taken bits from everything and customized it. In an interview with Rolling Stones magazine, Stephen Van Zandt said, I am a Reformed Taoist, part-time Buddhist, Hindu, animist, pagan, Jewish mystic, and Christian. It can't be all those things. They don't fit together. We want to pick and choose the parts that we like from all religions and create a God that is to our liking. The problem is, when we create our own God, it makes us God and makes our God the creation. We don't create God. God created us. We report to him. Since everything was created by God, doesn't it make sense that he should be the one that gets to make the rules that govern everything? People say, well, how can you be so arrogant to believe that there's only one God and only one way to heaven? To that I say, I'm not the one who said it. I've simply chosen to put my trust in the one that said it. It's not arrogant to say, I believe that God is who he said he is. It's arrogant to say, God is whoever and whatever I say he is. It's not arrogant to say, I believe Jesus when he says he is the only way to God. It's arrogant to say, I don't like the idea of Jesus being the only way to God, so I've decided that all roads lead to heaven. People say, well, I just can't believe in a God who would send someone to hell. Or, I can't follow a God that would say homosexual behavior is wrong. Or, I can't believe in a God that would allow bad things to happen. You can choose to believe anything you want, but just because you believe it doesn't make it right. One of these days, we will all stand before God on Judgment Day. And you won't be judged by the God you wanted to believe in. You'll be judged by the only God there is. And it will be his standards that you will be judged by. The God who created the universe with the power of his word is the one who has the right to tell us who he is and how he should be worshiped. He's the one who has the authority to make the rules, and he's the one that we will someday answer to. We can protest, we can complain, we can wish that things were different, but we don't make the rules. He does. God is the chief executive officer. He makes the rules. He's authorized to give any orders he pleases. It is his prerogative. Nobody outrules him. He doesn't answer to a legislative branch. He is both the legislative and judicial branches all rolled up into one. Everything and everyone answers to him. One of these days, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And there will people say, but I followed Buddha, or I followed this person, or well, I was, doing. It doesn't matter what you were doing. There is only one way. There is only one God. His opinion is the only opinion that matters because he created life and he makes the rules for life. You shall have no other gods before my face. If you want to come into my presence, if you want to share in the paradise that I am creating for you, you must do it my way. Don't think you can come into my house and bring another God with you, because I won't allow it. In my house, I am the only God. He is God. I am not. Which means I listen to his rules and I follow his rules. You shall have no other gods. God says, I alone am God. There is no other. That's executive order number 1. One God. You get to choose what you're going to do with it. Will you accept it? You don't have to like it. But will you accept it? Your choice. Joshua said choose. But don't try to do both. You're either for God or you're against him. There's no in between. What are you going to do with God? Will you choose the one and only? Or do you want to create a God to your liking? Let's bow our head and close our eyes. Maybe there's someone here this morning, and after hearing the message, and I believe that everything I preach comes from God, the Holy Spirit lays on my heart, I just pass it on. So if you don't like the message, take it up with the true message giver. I'm just passing on the words to you. But maybe there's someone here sitting here this morning and say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I've been trying to mix and match, and I've been throwing out the scriptures I don't like and trying to say that one doesn't really mean that, and I've been borrowing over. Well, this person says this, I like that idea, so I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to put it in here, and I've been making a religion that suits me. But this morning you realize, you know what? There is only one way, and I haven't been walking down that way. I need to start following only one commanding officer. I need to put all of my faith in the one true God. If you're here this morning, you be honest and say, Pastor Jerry, that's me. I need to start following God alone. If you just raise your hand and look at me, I just want to know who you are. I'm not going to embarrass you in front of me. Thank you. Once I acknowledge you, I just want to know who you are so I can be praying for you during the week. Thank you. There's another one. Anybody else? I've been trying to mix and match gods. I've been creating a Franken God. That's really what it is, putting bits and pieces together. You say, 2 have raised their hands. Anybody else says, you know what, that's me. I've been trying to create a God to my liking, but I realize I'm not the creator. I'm the created. And I'm going to start putting all my faith and all my trust in the one who is God, the one who does have the... Anybody else? Raise your hand. Look at me. There were 2. Anybody else? All right, Heavenly Father, I thank you for these 2 that have been honest enough and brave enough to raise their hands. And I believe there could be others here who maybe they're sitting there and they're struggling with this and they want to raise their hand, but they're embarrassed to raise their hand. Father, I just pray that you would help us to digest this message through the week. Help us to take it into our hearts. And reveal to us all of the areas where we have tried to borrow and bring in things from other places and listening to other voices and saying, that sounds better, I like that one better, and trying to change what you have said in your word. I pray for these 2 that you would help them to get back on the right path. And maybe they've never been totally on the right path. Maybe they've been kind of stretched and trying to go down 2 paths at the same time. Bring them to the straight and narrow. Help them to spend time in your word and to get here every time the doors are open so they can hear the teaching and hear what it is that you really have to say. Help them to put 100% of their trust in you. And even the parts they don't understand, the parts they don't like, it doesn't matter because I don't make the rules. God does. And for the rest of us, I pray that you would reveal to us, because each one of us has areas in our lives where we've kind of strayed. We each have there are things in the Bible that we don't like, and we each pick and choose. Help us to stop seeing Christianity as a smorgasbord. We eat what you have put on the plate. Help us to put our full trust, all of our faith in you and you alone. We love you, Jesus. Amen.